So with that, I have Hope Solo here. It's difficult to introduce someone who everybody knows of, but I will tell you one thing about Hope that nobody knows of, and I didn't know of it till last night. We had a session last night at FC Boulder, which is a local youth soccer club. Hope came after a long day here, visiting classes. And we got there last night, and literally there was 250 or 300 kids from this big to that big. And after Hope had a discussion kind of like this, they had gloves, they had jerseys, they had balls, and they all wanted to meet with Hope. Hope stayed for hours and met with every single one of them, which was fantastic. So Hope, welcome back to Boulder.
Thank you again.
All right, so we're going to talk about the primary topic will be the equal pay dispute in U.S. soccer involving the women wanting to get equal pay to the men's team. And I was wondering, maybe we could start by you could tell us a little bit of the background of that, and what is equal pay among whom, from whom, who's paying who here?
So there's a long history. And it's really hard to know where to start to give you the background. It's complicated. The law, the Equal Pay Act and Title VII has been in effect for over 50 years, since 1963. Here we are in 2019, and we are still fighting the good fight through the court system. It's unfortunate, but that's what we have to do to really make a difference, because what I have learned personally is that people in power don't give up their power very easily. You have to take it from them, and you have to fight for your rights. So this has been a long battle, a long fight. I've played on the U.S. team for close to 20 years, and throughout those 20 years, I personally saw all of the discrepancies and inequities between the men and the women's team. And in the course of 5 CBAs, there was no negotiating with U.S. Soccer. U.S. Soccer would merely say, this is the budget, and within the budget that we are going to give for the women's team, you can choose if you want to fly in first class or if you want to stay in 5-star hotels. You can choose if you instead want to stay in 2-star hotels and get a little bit more pay. But ultimately, that was their negotiating. And that's not negotiating. That's telling us how much money they have, and that's that. So throughout the years, I spoke to the former president of U.S. Soccer, and I said, why can't we just get paid equally to the men? They're not ranked, they're not winning World Cups. We are. The women's team is very recognizable commercially. We bring in a lot of value to the federation, and we were always told it's a non-starter. We're not even going to have this conversation. So ultimately in 2015, when we won the World Cup, actually prior to winning the World Cup in 2015, in 2014, our CBA, which is our collective bargaining agreement, our contract with U.S. Soccer, expired. And so we were in another negotiating period. And we were negotiating for a very long time, going into 2015. And then we win the World Cup. So we win the World Cup, and we're still negotiating. And we had just broken every record. Ultimately, we had the most watched game for soccer in the history of the United States, men or women. So you add the fact that we won the World Cup, we all of a sudden have so much support from the United States. Thank you, everybody. And we had so much support from United States senators, former presidents, vice presidents, congressmen and women. The media was behind the women's team and our cause and our fight for equal pay. And U.S. Soccer still said, we don't really care what the United States senators say. We don't care that congressmen and women are behind the players. We're still not going to pay you equally. And so we as a team said, you know what? Now is the time to change the course of history. Because if we can't do it, the #1 team in the world who just won the World Cup, if we can't do it, nobody can. So we all looked at one another, direct in one another's eyes. And we said, do we understand how difficult this battle is going to be? It's not going to be easy. They're going to do everything they can to intimidate us. They are a multi-million-dollar company. They have attorneys, they have money, they have a lot of things going their way. And in their eyes, we're just a bunch of girls. So we were intimidated with the federation removing our health insurance, and we have players with children. So we knew it was going to be a very scary time for us. But ultimately, we all committed to the cause, and we decided, all right, this is time to force change. And that's when we made the first complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is a government agency in the United States. And we made the complaint to them. And unfortunately, this agency is underfunded and overworked. And oftentimes, because it is a government agency, they ebb and flow in the direction of that current administration. And they were in the process of going into the new administration. And unfortunately, it wasn't high on the agenda under the Trump administration for women's rights and equal pay. So it kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit, and the EEOC sat on our complaint for 2.5 years. I was fed up. I said, if the government agency isn't going to do anything about it, then we have to go even further. And I became the first athlete to ever sue their employer under the Equal Pay Act in Title VII for discrimination based off sex. I filed this in the federal court about 10 months ago, and it was scary. There I was, all on my own, on an island, all on my own. Sure enough, the current team took some time to join the fight. They just filed recently, a couple weeks ago, thank goodness. So now we're in the hands of the court, and we have to put our trust and our faith in the court system. And it could be several years till we get an answer.
So yesterday, I think it was in my class, you told a story of comparing the men's team goalkeeper and how much he played in 1 year versus how much you played, and the different performance level, and then the difference in your salary. Just to give people a sense of what we're talking about here, could you relate that?
Of course. So Tim Howard was the starting goalkeeper for the men's national team. Their World Cup was in 2014. In 2014, the men's national team played 8 games. In that year, they did not win a World Cup. He did not win the Golden Gloves, which is the best goalkeeper in the tournament. And they played 8 games. In 2015, which is the Women's World Cup year, we played 24 games. We won the World Cup. I got the best goalkeeper of the tournament. I won the Golden Glove Award. And I received $40,000 less than Tim Howard for playing a third of the games.
So it's real, the inequities. Can you say something about what's it like being out in front? So you've been a leader on this issue for a long time. Just in the back, we watched the Nike commercial. Probably a lot of you have seen it, with women being crazy, getting angry, smashing their rackets. You've been doing that for a long time. And
I was doing it when it wasn't cool.
Yeah. So
and it wasn't commercialized. And,
yeah. So what's it like being out in front and then all of a sudden seeing Nike saying, "Oh, this is the best thing in the world"?
It's like a lot of things, you do things when they're not popular in that point in time, and you feel lonely. I pride myself in always standing for what I believe in, but it's not always popular. I've taken a lot of hits along the way. I've had a lot of labels put on me: the loudmouth athlete, the outspoken one, the poor sport. But now it's celebrated. I'm like, I got ridiculed for that because of my competitive nature and because of my passion on the field and because of my desire to win for our country and for a number of different reasons. And I really believe I never would have been the player I was without that passion that was deep inside of me. And to see Nike now celebrating, I mean, it's typical. They commercialize things that weren't so popular. It's a good thing because you have to start somewhere, and I think it's only going to continue to give people more perspective on women's sports when they see Nike come into the picture and they see these big corporate sponsorships come into the picture. But keep in mind, I got fired. There's 2 reasons that U.S. Soccer says I got fired. They say that I was a poor sport in the 2016 Olympics for calling our opponents cowards. But now it's celebrated. I know it's not true. That's not why I got fired. I got fired from the United States Soccer Federation because of being the biggest advocate for equal pay. I was a thorn in their side. They wanted to remove their biggest adversary. And they thought by removing me, then the fight would be gone. So I got fired after the 2016 Olympics, a very public firing. And little did they know, by firing me, I became unencumbered. I no longer had to be politically correct for the Olympic Committee. I no longer had to be politically correct for my sponsors. I didn't have to be, be under kind of people always watching over me, being my employer, on how I act and what I do. And I could finally speak openly and honestly about how the Federation treated the women. I could finally do interviews about the inequities and the inequalities and the problems within the Federation. And so actually them firing me has allowed me now to fight even harder for equality and equal pay.
I'm going to go to your questions here in a second, but before we get to that, and I'm not going to go too far into the rabbit hole of soccer politics, but you decided to run for the president of the federation that you're suing last year. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience, your decision along the way? Why did you run for the president? Was that, do you think, effective? Did it, would you do it again?
I would never, ever do it again. Make myself very clear on that. I knew that my voice needed to be heard. I knew that I had to represent voices that weren't being heard. I didn't run for president of US Soccer because I thought I was going to win. I ran because the truth needed to be out there, and I ran because I wanted to make a difference. And when I first got into the race, I think people didn't take me seriously. And let me tell you, I worked my butt off. We didn't have somebody financing my campaign that every other person who ran for president, they usually had somebody funding their campaign. We had my manager working for free, we had an attorney helping us out, but we weren't being funded. We have all of the other candidates going across the country to meet with all of the voting delegates, and I'm in my tiny little home on the phone spending hours calling the voting delegates, people I don't know. And over the course throughout all of my conversations, I learned about not just the problems about the way the Federation treated women, but I learned about all of the problems amongst soccer in America. I'm talking about the youth soccer problems, adult soccer problems, the lack of funding for amateur soccer in America, even though it's a nonprofit organization who is obligated to support all of the soccer constituents in America. I learned that we are alienating even more communities than I ever could have imagined. All of our Hispanic communities, our rural communities, anyone that doesn't have a major league soccer team in their own cities, often, well, most likely would never be able to play for their country. So no longer could the best athletes and the best soccer players be found to play for our country. And I realized that if I was a youth soccer player today, I never would have been able to fulfill my dreams of playing in the Olympics and the World Cup, because simply my family didn't have enough money for me to play soccer the way the costs are today. So I realized it's a sad time for soccer in America, and all of these voting delegates taught me all of their issues, their personal issues. And throughout that process, it was incredible. It was heartbreaking, but because I educated myself so much more, we met a lot of people who want to do the right things for soccer, and I'm really glad that I ran, because we continue to have those relationships, and we're continuing to try to make a difference in the soccer world. I was the last person to receive my nomination. All of the candidates had been out there, promoting themselves for close to a year, 10 months. And I was the very last person to enter the race, I think, with 2 months before the election, 2 months, I think. So I didn't have a lot of time to gain votes. And I didn't have a lot of time to get my 3 nominations that you need. And throughout this process, you realize that nobody knows the rules. Nobody knows the rules about the election. So people nominated me, and then they realized that they actually can't nominate me. And they didn't understand why, because they pay their fees to US Soccer, so nobody even knew who the voting delegates were. And that's the way US Soccer wants it, because then they can the people they want at the head, they know who all the voting delegates are. We didn't even get the final voting delegate list until midnight the night before the election. So we didn't even know the entire list of who to campaign against. So these are the issues that we learned. So I was the last to get my final nominee, I think the very last day possible. I got my final nomination. You need 3. The other 3 I got were denied. And I got my 3. I was the last to enter the race out of 8 candidates. I finished 5th. But what was incredible is my voters, the day of the election, were loyal voters. Every other voter lost, each round of votes. They either lost votes or they gained votes, but mine were very, very loyal, and that was pretty incredible to see. After I gave my speech, which I ridiculed the current federation and the current president, who, by the way, they were my former employers, and I have the podium right here, and I have the CEO of the federation right to my left, sandwiched in between the president right to my right, and I go up and I give this scathing speech, honest speech, necessary speech, and I was the only candidate to get this incredible standing ovation. And to this day, I'm pretty proud of that.
All right, I'll add that to the other 500. All right, this is a student question, and I'm going to preface it with some more information. So the US Open tennis tournament, Billie Jean King campaigned for equal pay. Venus Williams campaigned in Wimbledon, and in tennis there's equal pay. USA Hockey in the last couple of years has granted equal pay. And the question is, what's the biggest problem here? What's the hang-up for granting equal pay to women for performing the same job as the men? What do you see as the biggest obstacle?
The absolute biggest obstacle is the history and the culture within US Soccer, which is male chauvinism. That's what it is. We've seen it in a number of different ways, and the lack of marketing between the men and the women's team. It's like the federation wants the women to be successful, but not too successful. It's like they want to keep us happy so that we don't ask for more, but they still don't want to abide by federal law. It's like, I found out, for instance, after we won the 2015 World Cup, we did a tour around America, the Victory Tour. And we played in my hometown of Seattle. And I know the owners of the stadium, used to be Quest, I think they renamed it again. But anyways, they believed that we would absolutely fill the stadium. It's post-World Cup, it's a Victory Tour. Seattle's a huge soccer city. And we could have easily gotten 50 to 60,000 people post-World Cup in this football stadium, American football stadium. And US Soccer decides to not open the upper tiers. They only wanted to keep the lower tiers open, which means we can only sell about 25,000 tickets, which is the average that they want to sell, because 25,000 tickets, they break even, and we can't then go and say, well, we sold more tickets than the men, or we have more money in ticket sales than the men. The men, when they play, they open the entire stadium. So that's just one example of there's no reason for that. It's male chauvinism. Why wouldn't they want us to make more money for them? They just want to keep us right here, not up here.
All right. This is a good question. We haven't gotten to this in the last 2 days, which is good because we covered a lot of territory. So can you talk about the artificial turf issue? And why is it that women play on artificial turf in US soccer and the men don't? And is that changing?
I was so angry when the World Cup was on turf in Canada. Ooh, I was so mad. But our team actually filed a lawsuit in Canada in the tribunal court. But we realized that before the World Cup started, they would never hear our case. We had strong evidence to win the case against FIFA. This is against FIFA. We had very strong evidence, but it just never was going to get to court in time. So we ended up dropping it and focused on the World Cup. But that World Cup on turf was very difficult for our team. We were losing players left and right. Players' joints hurt every game, even amongst the very useful players like the 17-year-olds. So it was tough. It was really, and I always thought it was apropos the fact that we won the World Cup in Canada on turf. It's just kind of funny. But U.S. Soccer would never agree in our contracts to only play us on grass. We often got older stadiums. There's a stadium in Alabama, for instance. It's falling apart. It was unsafe conditions. There's a stadium in Hawaii where publicly we finally said, we're not playing here. The turf is literally coming off the field. And we felt really bad because a lot of people were excited to see us play in Hawaii. We don't usually go to Hawaii. So we let down a lot of our fans, but we had to take a stand and we said we're not going to play. But we thought in that moment the Federation apologized publicly to the players, saying we didn't realize they were unsafe conditions. We have protocol in place to make sure that somebody goes and inspects the fields prior to the team arriving. But someone dropped the ball, so they blamed somebody else. And they said it won't happen again. But in our contracts, they would never say we wouldn't play on turf fields. So there's a huge amount, I don't remember the numbers, but when you look at the amount of games the men play and the amount of games the women's play in a year, the women always play more games on turf than the men. For no reason, it doesn't make a lot of sense.
All right, so this follows up on that. Can you say something about your the mixed feelings that maybe you had or the other players playing, for the U.S. team, knowing that you're in a conflict with the management of the U.S. team? Are you able to separate out the patriotism and the flag and then going in a big stadium versus realizing that your workplace isn't ideal?
Yeah, I think we want to win. We come from a culture of winning on the women's national team, winning at all costs. We try to find a way to win, and when you win, you have more fun, ultimately. So I think that breeds the passion. Winning continues to breed that passion. So when we get on the field, especially in a World Cup stage or in the Olympics, you don't care about the lawsuits. You don't care about all the politics because you're truly playing for all the sacrifices that you personally have made to get to that point, all the sacrifices that your family has made to help you get to that point. You're playing for your teammates, for your country. You're playing for the beauty of the game. There's so many reasons why you're on that soccer field in that moment of time that everything else just subsides, and you're really playing for the beauty of the game. I think there's probably some moments, like some friendlies in bad stadiums, games that maybe don't have a lot of impact or meaning behind them, where I think players get angry. You're going into locker rooms where they're unsanitary. So there are moments where you feel it and you get angry at the management. But when you go out on the field, you respect your opponent and you play with all of your efforts and all of your might and all of your passion.
All right, most of these are from students. I'm not saying that, but here's another one from a student. First, thank you for being such a good role model. So who were your biggest supporters when you were out there alone, being the face of equal pay? Where'd your support come from? Who supported you?
I felt all alone for a while, a little bit of self-pity, I guess. But then you realize there's so many other people out there that want change, who don't really know where to start or how to make a difference, don't really have the voice or the platform on social media, maybe aren't in the public eye. And so you start to gain a sense of confidence because you really know that you're helping, and there's a community out there who wants to fight for change. And this isn't just here locally in America, this is all around the world. There's a global push right now to create change and transparency and equality on the global stage, of course in FIFA, but amongst every individual federation. So there's a huge amount of support that I didn't know was out there until I really got in the ring and started fighting this battle. And then outside of kind of that global support and people that are a little bit more at an arm's length distance away, I had my management team. I had my incredible husband who saw the ups and downs of this fight and the legal battle and how stressful it can be. So it was really my inner circle, and I had to cut a lot of people out of my life to create this sense of calm and a sense of focus. And when I say cut people out of my life, you know, I used to be with an agent, a big soccer agent, who really didn't care about me as a person, but really just wanted me to make money any way possible. Go ahead and, you know, sign up for Playboy. Go ahead and do things you don't agree with, but hey, your name's out there, your voice is out there, your face is out there, people will recognize you. And it went against everything I believed. And I really had to cut those people out and only surround myself with people who believed in our cause, believed in the fight, and supported me and loved me. And that really enabled me to continue going forward.
All right, another student question. This broadens it out. So what advice would you give a young woman going into a science, technology, engineering, medical field where women are not always treated or paid the same as men?
What advice? I mean, let's be honest, there's sexism and male chauvinism in the history of not just our country, but in the history of the world. This is the world that we live in, and we are making changes, and it's incredible to see. There's some progressive changes, there's some slow changes, but we are making these changes. I would say, know what you're getting into, and know how you want to handle it before you get into these situations, because I was naive. I grew up in a very small town with my grandma being a very strong woman and my mom sometimes going against the grain and having confidence to do that. So when I went to college, I thought, I can do anything I want in the world. I didn't realize that I was just a girl, just a woman, because when I got to college, reality hit me. And I was told, you're just a soccer player at a big university, and we football players make all the money. Nobody cares about you guys, so know your place. And I learned very, very quickly that the world's not as easy for us, and you have to know how you want to handle it. And like I said, going into it, I was naive. And I think that's the best advice I can give you. Think about those issues now.
All right, we have a question about from another student who's asking about if you could talk a little bit about the pro side of women's soccer. So we've talked about the U.S. national team, but a lot of women play soccer for money on the pro side. What are some of the issues there? And maybe you can talk a little bit about your own experience going from college into the pro ranks.
I've played in America in three different professional leagues. Two of them went bankrupt, and the third one is not doing that great. The current one, which is called the NWSL, is not doing that great. When I played in the NWSL for Seattle, I had a teammate living out of her car, because she couldn't even make enough money to afford to find a place to live. I told Sunil Gulati, the former president of U.S. Soccer, I said, why are we calling this a professional league? If you're calling us professional soccer players, then I need to be able to support myself without supplementing my income through coaching, through appearances, through photo shoots. If you're going to call me a professional, then let me have a professional living wages. And you know, it didn't matter. I wanted to call it a semi-pro league, but we called it a professional league, and so many players weren't able to make a living. Things are getting a little bit better, but there's still a lot of unprofessional standards amongst the league, whether it's doctors, trainers, fields, the same issues. But we need it. We need a professional league here in America, because we have young girls who dream to play professional soccer. But that's the problem, is it's used against us as athletes. They say, it's your duty to build soccer here in America, and we feel that duty. We take it very seriously. But does that mean that we should play for pennies because it's our duty? So we struggle internally fighting this, because we want to do what's best for the future generations, and we want to give these young girls a place to play, but it needs to be a place to play where they can actually make a living when they enter into the league. So it's hard for us, because we don't want to upset the fans. We want to stand for something. We know it's our obligation to build soccer in America, and it's been really difficult, and I hope this league doesn't fold, but it might fold as well. I ended up, after the first 2 leagues folded, it was my dream to play professional soccer after college, and I got drafted, and I thought I was big time, and then we got told, oh, you need to take a pay cut. Everybody in the league needs to take a pay cut. And I just got into the league. And shortly thereafter, the end of the season, I go back to my home in Seattle, and I get a phone call, and they say, we went bankrupt. There's no more league. At that point in time, I was like, what am I supposed to do? It's been my dream to play professional soccer, and there's no more professional soccer in America. So I was about to get a 9-to-5, about to get a job, a real job. That's what they say, right? Enter the real world. And I decided I'm not going to give up yet, and I went overseas to play, and I played in Europe. So I did play professionally in Europe, and I made a decent salary and a decent living. And then I came back to America and played in a league that folded again. so who knows? Who knows? I just hope it's here to stay, but there's a lot of improvements that need to be made.
All right, here's a good question. Do you know if the players on the U.S. men's team are supportive of the pay equity case for women?
You know how you guys can help? Any of you on social media? You should ask them on social media, how come you're silent? You know, this isn't a competition between the men and the women. I understand how it might possibly feel that way, I guess, but this is federal law. This is law. It's not somebody's opinion. Should the women get paid more or shouldn't they get paid more? This is federal law. It's factual. It's based off of facts. And to not hear the men, it makes you wonder, are they insecure about it? Are they insecure about the fact that all the arguments have to do with the women are the winning side and the men aren't the winning side? And so I'm sure that brings a lot of insecurities to the men's team. But I would love to see them be a little bit more vocal, because it's not opinion-based, it's factually based. And if any of you out there are on social media, please go to Tim Howard, go to the current players and ask them directly, why aren't you supporting openly the women's fight for equal pay? Because I would love to hear the answer as well.
All right, did you guys ever consider, given your popularity, going on strike?
I wanted to go on strike. We actually voted. We had a majority vote to go on strike for the Algarve tournament, which is one of our biggest tournaments every year. It's in Portugal. And we voted. And I think there were 2 players who voted against it. And these 2 players were new and young and really just wanted their opportunity to play for their country. But we went forward and decided we were going to do this. And then we had our head of our Players Association, our attorney, by the name of John Langle, not the current head of the PA and not Rich Nichols, who actually was the one in charge of our fight for equal pay, but this is our previous attorney, John Langle. And he was told by U.S. Soccer that if these women go on strike, they actually said if these girls go on strike, then we won't schedule any games for them the rest of the year. We're not going to give them back pay once we agree to something moving forward, and they will lose all of their health insurance. Our attorney relayed that to us, and our attorney, who should help us understand the law, who should help us lead the way and give us a sense of confidence and bring us together, actually sided with U.S. Soccer. He didn't lead us, and that's why eventually we got rid of him. But it scared a lot of the players, and it scared a lot of the players with children to lose their health insurance. And once we took that vote, we took another vote, and the majority just changed. And that's how easy the Federation can intimidate, and that's how easy they can divide and conquer you. Because when we did the revote, we had the president reaching out to individual players, texting them, calling their agents, having their agents talk to the players saying, hey, they don't want to do this, make sure your player doesn't vote for this. So we have agents and the president reaching out to individual players. And we tried to tell everyone, do not accept these phone calls, do not text anyone back, we need to stay together. But ultimately, people feel feel good when the president calls you. They feel good, you know, when they're getting advice from their agents. So the U.S. Soccer knows how to divide and conquer, and ultimately we never went on strike. And I wish we did. I wish we had a current CBA that's equal, and even our current CBA of the women's national team is unequal, and that's been after our fight for equal pay. So, like I said, I think the only way to get equal pay is by pushing it through the court system, and it's going to be a long battle, and probably 3 or 4 more years until we get any definitive answers from the courts. Probably, there's a lot of steps that we must go through, but we are fighting, and we're not going to stop this fight. I'll tell you one thing right now, they can offer me a ton of money for a settlement. I will not settle because, thank you. The only way things will change is by changing the course of history, and there has to be a court case that actually does that. So that's why I don't intend to settle with U.S. Soccer.
All right, time check. We got about 20 minutes, so if you got that burning question, you better send it up here soon. All right, this is, again, from another student. This is more of a personal question. So when you're on the public stage as arguably the best goalkeeper in the world, and you're also one of the biggest critics of U.S. soccer, do you often find yourself running into critics of you, and is it difficult to be a public figure?
I have a ton of critics. I guess I'm very polarizing. It's been very difficult to be in the public eye. I'm actually a very introverted person. I don't love to be in the limelight. I've pushed myself and challenged myself. I've done things that I thought I would never do, like Dancing with the Stars. Crazy. But I'm actually very introverted. I don't like big groups of people. I love to connect with people in smaller groups. So I think it's difficult for those type of athletes because your job is to be in the limelight. Your job is to be in the public life, or to be in the public. Your job is to do interviews, to be a spokesperson. And I think you can make a difference and you can be a role model without having to do all of that, because sometimes it doesn't allow for some of these athletes to be their best self. So it's been very difficult. I've learned how to handle all of the criticism. I've learned how to handle all of the pressure as well as being in the spotlight. I don't love it. I don't think I'll ever love it. But with my new movie coming out, I think it's going to continue for quite some time. But fortunately for me, my husband and I got out of Seattle, where we both were raised in the state of Washington. He played professional football in Seattle. I played professional soccer. We both went to school at the University of Washington. And everybody thought they knew us. Everybody knew where we lived. And we really kind of just wanted some privacy. And we knew we needed that for our mental sanity. So we actually bought 60 acres and we moved out into the mountains, and every day I wake up, I feel at peace. You know, I have renewed energy to continue these battles in the court, to continue these public battles, to travel the world and continue the fight. But I needed to get out of the spotlight to continue moving forward. So that's what I did for myself, and I feel much healthier for that.
All right, I'm going to take a written question. So this is about young athletes. So young athletes have to specialize in only one sport if they hope to get an athletic scholarship. In soccer, there aren't that many scholarships, unlike in college football. What's your advice for young soccer players and college-age soccer players? So if you were in college today, how would things look? How's it different? And
the recruiting process today is so much different than when I was recruited for college. I strongly, strongly believe that to get the best athlete out of a young girl or out of a young boy is to introduce them to a number of different sports. I wouldn't be the goalkeeper that I was without playing basketball, without playing volleyball, track, and certainly not without playing on the field. I was a field player, and that's how I got my ball skills as a goalkeeper. That's how I got my fitness and my agility. So it's hard, it's very difficult because colleges now are recruiting kids at a much younger age, and there's this pressure on the parents to get trainers for kids at an early age and to help them specialize in something. But ultimately, I don't think that brings out their best qualities. So I don't know how to advise parents or young children, but what I do know, and a lot of my friends are coaches and directors at big-time soccer clubs throughout the United States, and what they tell me is that when these kids start to specialize in one position or one sport, you see them tire out, and it removes the fun from the game. And I know have fun is so cliche, but if you're not seeing these kids really enjoy what they're doing, then they're going to burn out, and they're certainly not going to be successful as they continue forward through college. So if you see your kid going to weightlifting, and then going to their personal trainer, and then going to practice 3 days a week, and then not enjoying high school soccer because they can only play club soccer, at some point, maybe it's not the best thing for them. So I think parents have to be really open-minded to that, and I think you got to instill that fun, because even in the youth sport, or youth soccer especially, we're starting to commercialize it. We're paying a lot of fees for these kids to play sports, and it's becoming a job for a lot of these kids. In fact, another one of my good friends, who is also a scout and a coach for the U.S. Soccer Federation, says that their 8-year-olds are supposed to watch video, watch film, be in hour-long meetings, and they're trying to teach these 8-year-olds how to easily then work their way up to the national team, because if they're used to watching film at 8 years old, then they know the structure of the national team. And she says, that's not what I believe in. I want these 8-year-olds to have fun. I want them to learn what they're great at on the field, not by watching films and clips at 8 years old. So it's a challenge right now. And I just hope that all you coaches out there and parents out there really instill that fun in the kids still.
All right, so I have a few questions that I'm going to blend together. And I've heard you talk about this now a number of times. You talked about it in your U.S. soccer campaign. Can you say something about the economic inequalities? So you focus on gender equality, but also in soccer in particular, as in other youth sports, if you're from a lower income background, you don't really have as much opportunity. And I've heard you talk about the opportunities you had and didn't have when you were younger. What was your position in the U.S. soccer campaign about the economics of youth sport and soccer in particular?
Soccer is supposed to be the world's game. Everybody is welcome. Everybody is invited to play. You can pick up a soccer ball anywhere and you play the beautiful game. And in America, our system is backwards. In America, you have to have money in hopes to play for the United States. So these youth programs are paying thousands of dollars, especially for the elite clubs. So an elite club is where the U.S. Soccer Scouts go. They're picking players from these elite clubs. And I always equate it to, how do we find the next LeBron James in the soccer world? Because LeBron James is from Akron, Ohio. We're not recruiting and we're not scouting in Akron, Ohio. We're certainly not going to the underrepresented communities throughout the United States. We're not going to the underprivileged. We're not going to the rural communities. We're going to the hot spots of the MLS teams, Major League Soccer here in America. So we are alienating so many communities. And unfortunately, in America, soccer has become the rich white kid sport. And it's heartbreaking because it affects a lot of things. Of course, it's alienating, but also our national teams could be so much better if we actually picked from the entire pool in the United States, and maybe our men's team would actually qualify for a World Cup if we truly brought in everybody who represents United States soccer players.
All right, so I'm going to hop around a lot of different topics here. How do you stay optimistic?
Oh, I think I alluded to it earlier. We moved to the mountains and got 60 acres, and we wake up to a rooster every morning, and seeing my husband on the tractor, and I have 5 dogs that I get to run by the river, and it's very peaceful. It really does rejuvenate me to continue the fight.
So there's a few questions here about Lunabar, and what do you know about Lunabar stepping in to try to address the pay gap? Is that a good model? What are your views on that?
For all of you who are unaware, the women's players get a bonus if they make the World Cup roster, and then obviously the men get a bonus too if they make the World Cup roster, and there's a discrepancy of about, don't quote me on this, it's like 37,000 or so, 30,000, I don't know, in the 30,000s range. So we had a company come in, Luna, the sport bars. They came in and said, well, we want to supplement that, and we're going to pay the difference of the salaries that the men got, and we're going to give each individual player on the World Cup roster that bonus. And so they came in to make that bonus equal, but it took an outside company to do that. And honestly, bravo for Luna. It's good for them marketing. It's good for their brand. I hope they truly believe in equality, and it's not simply for marketing. And I do believe probably they believe in it. But does it let the federation off the hook, or does it make them look bad? It's debatable. But also bravo for the players, because they're making more money. So it's a great thing, but it's still not equal, because it's up to the federation to really do that.
All right, I have a couple questions along these lines. How much do you think your platform as a top athlete helped your voice be heard? And how can a young girl make sure that her voice is heard without such a platform as a top athlete?
Honestly, I don't like social media. I really don't. It's a second job sometimes. And like I said, I'm introverted and I like my private life, even though my life is very public. So I guess it's a blessing and it's a curse to have a platform, because my voice is heard, but also I see all the criticism and the hate and the anger that can be out there, and that's hard to see. But what I would tell a youngster this day and age is your voice will be heard. The youth of today are the ones who are responsible for truly changing the world in the generations to come. It's not me up here at 37. Sorry, Roger, it's not Roger over here. It's the youngsters right now. They're really going to make, all you right here in the second row, you're going to make a difference. My young man right here in the first row. You can make a difference by using your voice. And you may not think that you have millions of followers on Instagram, but if you stand for what you believe in, and you have a sense of confidence in continuing to push forward even on those hard days when it may not be popular, then your voice will be heard, and you will create change, and you will make a difference in the world.
All right, for people who pay less attention to women's sports than men's, what would you tell them about why they should start paying more attention, either watching or going to events?
I don't need to convince anybody. Honestly, I'm not here to I don't know. I'm sorry. I'll speak specifically with soccer. It's beautiful. The women play a beautiful game. I'm not here to say we jump higher, run faster, or kick the ball further. I'm not here to fight that battle. But we do provide a very beautiful product. And if you don't see that, then I'm not going to be the one that convinces you otherwise, to be honest. That's that.
All right. So what's your analysis of the 2019 World Cup?
2019 Women's World Cup this summer is going to be exciting because France really knows how to host a tournament. It's going to be in soccer-specific, beautiful grass fields. It's going to be filled with a very intelligent soccer crowd, just like Germany was in 2011. The United States is obviously ranked #1 in the world, but I don't think rankings mean anything when it comes to a very intense tournament, because anything can happen. I've learned that in sports. In competition, that's why we love sports. That's why we love competition, is anything really can happen. And when you play that many games in a short amount of time, you see injury, you see people crack under pressure, you see other players you don't expect to step up, you see underdogs and Cinderella teams, you see good and bad coaching decisions. There's a lot of variables involved. So I'm pretty excited for the Women's World Cup. I will be broadcasting and commentating in Europe for it, which I'm pretty excited about. But I love right now watching France play, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on them, the fact that they're playing in their home soil. But I think they're just a beautiful team to watch, and they really know how to play the game. The other top teams would be Germany and England, and of course the United States. But at the end of the day, you have to have fitness, and you have to have fitness not just in those 90 minutes, but of the course of the eight games that you're going to be playing in. And it catches up to you. It doesn't matter how useful you are or if you're a veteran player. It catches up to you. And unfortunately, what I've seen is England has so much skill, and they could do so well in the tournament, but they're never fit. And it makes me so mad because I want to tell their coach, just get your team fit and you could possibly win the World Cup. And Brazil, obviously Brazil is a great team and they're never fit. They play great in certain games, but they can't continue it through the course of the entire tournament. So I would love to see Brazil fit, I would love to see England fit, and then I think you're going to see a spectacular tournament.
All right. So for 20 years or so, the U.S. has been dominant in the World Cup on the women's side. And now we're seeing more parity in the women's game. We've heard this come up the last couple of days while you've been in Boulder. Do you think that parity, the raising of the level of a lot of different teams, does that help or hurt the equal pay case?
The women, just to be clear, do not have to win the World Cup this summer for us to get equal pay. The parity helps the sport overall. You're seeing many different federations across the globe putting more money into the women's game. Iceland and Norway became the first countries to actually pay their women equally. U.S. soccer, the United States, could have and should have led that charge, but instead that goes to Iceland and Norway. And there are going to be other federations to follow. So the parity in the game only brings more competition to the game, brings more quality of games and more entertainment. And everybody loves the entertainment value, and certainly the corporations and the sponsorships love the entertainment value. And it's going to bring more money into the game, and women's football worldwide is really about to take off.
All right, we're getting near the end here, and I have a few questions I'm going to wrap together since we're on a university campus, and we talked a little bit about this in my class. What are your views on pay for college athletes, compensation for college athletes, which is another equity situation? You were a scholarship athlete. What are your views on that?
I think being a student is very difficult. Being a student athlete is very difficult. I'm not going to take away the difficulties it is just to be an everyday student. But at the same time, being a student athlete, you have more obligations. And not just a little, you have hours more of obligations every single day. Hours of weight training, hours of sessions, and this isn't just in season, this is out of season. And a lot of these young student athletes don't come from families who can just afford meals every day, don't come from families who can afford to not make money or not get a job. But you can't get a job if you're a student athlete. It's very difficult to balance all three. So I do believe that the universities are making a lot of money on the back of these young student athletes. I think these athletes could be compensated just to help them in their everyday lifestyles, just to help them eat a good meal from time to time. I think student athletes should get paid because the universities are making a ton of money off of it, and it's not going to hurt anybody.
All right, last question, and then remember, stay in your seats after we land and let people with connecting flights get to their next flight. All right, so in the best possible scenario, what does soccer look like in 2039?
2039?
Yeah, 2039. So let's say things go the way you want them to go, and court cases take a long time. Sometimes they're generational. But what's your vision for? I mean, when you're in your rocking chair, looking over your.
I already have a rocking chair.
With your 5 or 17 dogs by then. What's
maybe a couple kids.
A couple kids. What's success when you look back and you smile and you say, all right, this was all worth it? What's it look like?
It's going to be inclusive. It's going to be an inclusive game. We're going to have somebody at the helm of U.S. Soccer who goes back to really grassroots and really leading the way for inclusivity, transparency, equality. And we have to probably, the current federation probably has to implode in order for us to change the board, in order for us to really get the changes that the soccer community wants in America. But I want to turn on the television and I want to see the men and the women's team winning World Cups filled with people of all races, all colors. I want to see it be representative of America.
All right, on that note, let's thank Coach.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure to be here in Colorado and a pleasure to be in front of my fans again. So I miss you all, and thank you for having me.